Welcome to the August 3rd weekly JupyterLab call. Today we've got 20 people on the call. If you haven't already, please sign in. I just pasted the agenda link in the chat. And without any announcements up top, why don't we get started? Fred, you are number one on the list.
Hey guys, it's just for the announcement that the monthly performance meeting is just after this one. And that's all for me this week.
Okay, cool, thanks. Mike, you are up.
Hi, just a quick question about issue forms. So I noted that many users who fill out bug reports omit certain sections, and issue forms first make it easier to understand what we are asking for, and second make the experience of filling in the issues nicer for both the users and maintainers. So there is this new feature which is still in beta, but many other projects have adapted it. And my question is, should we migrate to having issue forms across JupyterLab repositories?
I think it looks nice. Fred has a thumbs up. Any other comments? Thumbs up from Martha. Cool. Love the thumbs up. It seems like, how about this? If anyone has an objection, now's a good time. If not, why don't we try it out? It seems pretty low stakes to try it out and might be helpful.
I think it would be nice if contributors could kind of skip that form, because sometimes we run into a bug and it's very well known it's a bug and it's easily reproducible. I think we should give contributors perhaps the benefit of the doubt and allow them to skip that form.
You can, I mean, this is probably too big a thing to ask, but you can modify the GitHub URL to go to issue/new and just get a blank issue.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Secret cheat code, I guess.
Yeah.
I like it.
We discourage it, but it is possible. Also, we've seen issues come in that way when people move them from another repo that just does a blank form.
Okay.
Last time I checked, even the list of templates at the bottom, there is just the create issue escape hatch.
Yeah,
Wait,
but
really?
it's tiny. Well, it's tiny, and some repos actually we can force it not to appear. So you have to actually type the URL. You can,
Okay.
yeah. We used to do that in, I think, Notebook, which for a time meant you actually couldn't file an issue at all in Notebook because we wanted to like shunt people over to different projects. That was before the Notebook 7 migration started in earnest.
Okay.
This came up during triage when we noticed that no new issues were coming in Notebook.
Cool. So do you object to the form existing, or do you just want it to be, do you want the fields to be optional? Like what's the request?
I mean, I guess like for me, it's just like this form that I'm seeing, it's, it's pretty long. Like for like established contributors who already, we already sort of have that implicit trust that like contributors kind of know what they're doing. It would just be a bit cumbersome, that's all. Like, I mean, if you can override it with /issue/new, then I don't really have any objections. Okay,
cool. And if it turns out that we have it in place and it does strike people as too onerous, we can revisit this again. It's not meant to be set in stone or anything. We can try it out and see if it's helpful. If it's not, let's not use it.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, cool. Oh, I am up next. So I know that a lot of people on this call don't work on Lumino that often, but I hope maybe that more people will start working on it. We have been thinking about some of the longstanding maintenance and other things that are in Lumino since 2019. We have a bunch of deprecated classes because we wanted to make sure anyone who'd written a phosphor theme or was targeting phosphor CSS classes, which all had the P prefix, didn't have to modify their code. And we had to change the TypeScript to make sure both of those classes were added. And we also had a strict backward compatibility requirement when it came to switching over to pointer events instead of mouse events. So we had both attached. That no longer seems necessary. All the browsers we support accept mouse events or emit mouse events as pointer events, so we can just switch straight to just pointer. There are changes that were made to icon, but were kept in a backward compatible way. So icons had a signature that was a little bit wonky because they could either be a string, which was the icon class, or they could be undefined, or they could be an icon renderer. And that is confusing. Then there's some packages that were old dependencies because a change in the way TypeScript emitted read-only attributes between what seemed to be a minor version bump actually ended up creating major version breaking incompatibility in the widget type definition. So we never upgraded TypeScript, which meant there were some nice features of the language we couldn't use. And so a lot of that stuff is in the default branch of Lumino now, but there's outstanding things to do. I think it's reasonable to basically just pick an arbitrary point and ship there, because strictly speaking, this doesn't have to be a major, it doesn't have to be a release that contains many new features. It could be a maintenance release, and we could wait until JupyterLab 5 for new APIs or new, really radical new features. But I did have a question. I've heard a few people make the claim that Lumino harms performance in their applications. And one of the big things that's come up is hit testing for the menu system. And I linked to a really well-documented comment that Mike wrote attempting to fix this. And I think getting this into Lumino 2 would be great. There's another issue that the Chrome developer tool showed that's somewhat related, which is about passive events, as opposed to like things like scrolling, which can create latency, and it can create locking. So I was going through the places in the code where that exists. And I kind of want to see basically, how's this going to impact people, especially widgets? And are there people that want to work on any Lumino things? And what are your thoughts in general?
We had a discussion about this in the widgets meeting yesterday. My guess is that it won't. Well, I think it depends on the release. We're releasing API widgets 8 very, very soon. It sounds like it'll not work for API widgets 7. So a question I have is, what's the timeline for release for Lumino 2, and is it going to be required in JupyterLab 4?
So I don't want to unilaterally say what that should be, but I can tell you that the mental model I had in mind when I started working on it was, this is an opportunity to get it into JupyterLab 4, or else we have to wait until 5. But if there's a strong objection, then we'll have to have the conversation and see if we can arrive at an answer. My intuition is it would be good to get it into 4, and that's my aspiration in the work that I've been putting on it.
And do you know when Lumino, do you have a target date for Lumino to be released?
Well, it's a question of how limited should our ambitions be. Right now, I think I actually made a mistake and maybe the document building is incorrect, but otherwise it's fairly shelf stable. Every new PR that goes in, I think the intention is we could stop right there if we had to. So we can pick a time and say that's the time after which we won't add stuff, because I don't think there's any shortage of stuff we might want to add. There's open issues, there's optimizations to be found, there's tests to be done, there's places to go replace, you know, all of the option checking that we did now that we have optional chaining. So there's a lot of stuff we could do. Like my PR was thousands of lines of code, unfortunately, right? And it's hard to review that stuff. But because there's so much of that, I think it'd be better for us to say, pick a time and say, let's not publish it any later than that, because there will be downstream consequences.
So my guess is it will work with iPadWidgets 8 with minimal changes for us, probably just updating the dependency. It'll probably break iPadWidgets 7. So I guess it's good timing that we're releasing iPadWidgets 8 so people can migrate before JupyterLab 4. But it sounds like it'll break iPadWidgets 7, which I think is okay as long as we get iPadWidgets 8 out soon enough that people can start migrating to it before JupyterLab 4.
Okay. Piyush and Gabe offered to work on Lumino stuff. We don't really have a fully triaged and prioritized list. That's it so far. I think it's only 4 issues attached to it. There's 2 more that are in the notes that aren't issues. They're just like hints as to how we can fix stuff. And I think it's time to go through the issue backlog and see which ones we can associate with Lumino 2. And I wanted to ask Mike if he could either comment or take a look at or give me a hint on this hit test one, because it seems like you've done a lot of thinking about it, and it might be that we already have a path out of it. And that's the biggest complaint I've heard so far that's about performance in Lumino. And it seems like fixing that would be really good. But for now, we can move on unless anyone else wanted to talk about Lumino. Okay. Steve, you are up. We can't hear you.
Yeah, thanks. So I just want to highlight the open PR I had. My original plan for the Hatch migration was to have everything in place, including the blog post before merging anything. But it turns out that JupyterLab PR is self-contained, the switch to the Hatch build backend. So it probably makes sense to get that in sooner than later so we can get an alpha release or 2 experience with that under our belts. And it's compatible regardless of whether extensions use setup tools or Hatch. So if anyone is willing to review that and get that in, that'd be appreciated. And so what's holding up the blog post is just me writing more documentation in Hatch Jupyter Builder itself that I can refer to in the blog post. Just finding time to do that. And that's it.
Cool, thanks. Anyone interested in reviewing this PR?
I will do it.
Awesome,
Thanks, Fred.
Okay, David, you are up.
Yeah. So I just wanted to call attention to some of the work that I've been doing for pretty much the past month. Yeah, so I wrote a design doc. So okay, let's take a few steps back. So there's a lot of server and client work that we're doing in JupyterLab that kind of needs the idea of a file ID service, which basically it's basically the whole point of a file ID service is to track the identity of a file across its entire lifetime, right? So the idea is like we associate each file with an immutable ID. And given this ID, you can always resolve it to a path. And given a path, you can always resolve it to an ID. So this relationship is bidirectional, and the whole point of the service is to preserve consistency between the ID and the path. And there's a lot of tricky questions that come up when we're dealing with what we call out-of-band edits, right? So an in-band edit is what we do through the contents manager, right? So like if you call like move or copy, we can listen to those events, and inside of our database table where we maintain the mapping between ID and path, we can just update the path accordingly. It's pretty simple. What gets tricky is out-of-band handling. So how do you monitor file system events that you can't really listen to, right? Like how do you track that consistently? And it's a pretty tricky question, but over the past few weeks, I put together a design document and a rough implementation of how this can be handled. So I just want to welcome PRs. There's already some unit tests that track the functionality of this, but I was mainly curious. I mainly just wanted to call it out because I know some contributors were looking forward to a file ID service because they can use it in their own whatever work that they're working on. So yeah, it's ready for review. And yeah.
Anyone willing to volunteer to review?
I think Kevin is already reviewing, so I don't think anyone should feel pressured or obligated to review. I know Zach is also taking a look at it, so like
Okay.
I mainly just want to put it out there. That's all.
Awesome, thank you. Great. So we have one item for additional discussion, but I'll wait a minute in case there's an update anyone else wanted to make. Okay. You know what? Actually, there's something I wanted to say. So last week I floated the idea of a roster for people hosting this call. I talked about it some more after this call with a few people who stayed on, and then it came up again in the governance call. And I'm going to be looking more into how to set up support for people to do it and making a sign-up sheet and helping sort of onboard, because even though it's obviously not a very complex process, as you see me not doing all that much, it's still some amount of context that you need to know beforehand. And without that, I can imagine very few people volunteering. So I want to make it not a complex thing to have to undertake and not a big burden. And as soon as I have some more to show for that, I will bring it up again. But in the back of your own mind, if occasionally you would like to host the call, just keep that in mind, because there will be a sign-up sheet sometime soon. You can do that, and everyone would be grateful, most of all me. Okay. Who added the SciPy 2022 tutorial link? And is there anything about it you'd like to discuss?
I added it, and nothing in particular, just FYI, and all the other SciPy 2022 videos are linked there as well. And well, I guess the one thing I would say is thanks again, Martha and Alex and others that worked on this tutorial.
Awesome. How did it go?
You can all be the judge of how awkward the three of us were in that couple-hour-long video.
Nice.
So you tell us. Yes.
being our first time back in front of real people in years.
I was surprised it's 2 hours. That's something that surprised me.
I'm
It's
surprised
4
it was
hours.
Only 2 hours. Yeah, the actual thing was 4 hours, which means they cut a lot of us walking around.
Oh, goodness.
I'll leave you a nice comment on YouTube.
Yeah, same.
There is also a widgets tutorial and several other, I think, mentions of JupyterLab throughout the conference. So
That is awesome. I'm glad other people can see it. It's not just who could show up at SciPy. That's really good too. Okay.
Hey, there was a paper on JupyterLab extensions.
What's that?
I just said there was a paper on JupyterLab extensions. Never mind, I'm kidding.
If no one has anything else, I'll stop the recording. Okay.